Hey everyone, I'm so excited to kick off this series, which I'm calling Scars and Wisdom. And the purpose of this, kind of the thought behind this is just to have a conversation space where we honor the truth of what we've experienced and gone through and the wisdom that lives in us because of it. So the first interview, I'm so excited, is with Rose Sprinkle. And Rose, I'm going to let you just introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and what you're up to in this world.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Karen. I'm excited to be here. My name is Rose Sprinkle. It is my real name. That's always the first question I get. I'm married into it. Yeah, I just thought it was perfect when
It's
saying
a
that.
fun name. It's like, it makes me happy when I say it.
Yeah, sometimes I get called Rose Sparkle, Rose Sprinkle. But anyway, so I'm an award-winning children's author. So I wrote a series. Right now we have 8 different books, and they're called The Little Virtues. And basically what happened was I went through a very traumatic experience where I dealt with grief and kind of was thrown into that world of loss. And that inspired my very first book called Little Love. And it's about this girl who has this hole in her heart. She doesn't know how to heal it, like how it is when we're going through that process. And then in the end, she meets a version of herself that's whole and complete. And then she learns to give that love back to other people. I just kept that trend anytime I was going through a really serious life trial or lesson. I would just heal through writing these books. And so each book teaches a different lesson at a different time. And so now I'm in the middle of writing a curriculum that kind of dives deeper into each of these topics and just trying to arm kids with the tools to help maybe anticipate some of these really hard things in life that kind of go under the radar sometimes. So,
That is amazing. And what I love about being in this space is all the different things people are doing. It's always like fascinating to me that everyone's taking the experiences, but it's manifesting in a different way, but in a way that's so needed, right? And so for you to do that through children's books is, I'm just in awe of what you're doing. And like you said, really important. And the sooner that we can help children understand this, the better they're going to be. This is really important work that you're doing. So cool.
yeah, I think what's interesting is I felt inspired to write these books before I had a family, before I even had kids. Because I was thinking, like, man, I wish I had these tools growing up. Because then maybe I would, I don't know, maybe there's like a judgment of myself, but maybe I'd be able to handle the situation better. I don't think there's any way you can handle grief very well. I think that's the whole nature of grief. It's like completely messy. And however put together your life was before, it's so life changing that afterwards it can just be a complete mess. And you can't even recognize yourself or recognize what's going on around the world around you. At least that was my experience. So I thought, how can I take this like suffering and put purpose to it so it does some good in the world versus me just constantly being hate? And like, how can I channel it into something productive? And yeah, that was what was birthed was my children's story. And I think Little Love, it really wrote itself. Like I think I had written it within 30 minutes. It was just like, it just poured out of me after
It's
dealing,
flowed. Hmm.
yeah, dealing with my trauma for like 2 years. It was just like, okay, if I had to explain to somebody how I feel right now, basically just like I have a hole in my heart. And that was the beginning of the story. Yeah.
Wow. So relatable. And I know so many people can relate to that feeling that you just perfectly articulated. So thank you for sharing, how you're helping the world with your books. And I can't wait to look into those after our call today. But wanted to jump into a little bit of going backwards. So for you, there was a scar, right? Something really impactful happened in your life that kind of threw you into the grief trenches. So could you talk to us a little bit about what that was?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I was in my single down phase. I think I was like 25 or 26 when this happened, but I had a best friend just pass away very suddenly. And I ended up like finding her when she had passed. And that in and of itself was very like traumatizing. Just the moment, figuring out what needed to happen, what was going on. But what I didn't anticipate was like the long curve of healing afterwards. Like I knew I was going to grieve her, but I didn't anticipate this whole other element of trauma of it. So it
Mm,
started manifesting itself First, I had a move right after that, like about 2 weeks after that happened. I had already planned to move back home to my home state in Washington. And so that was like a whole nother change. I was taken out of my environment where I had a really good support group, and then I was like replanted in a new place. So the combination was just a lot to handle with. So what happened was I started having these like anxiety attacks at work, or I started having like night terrors at night. And I don't know if you've ever experienced like night terrors, or even if your audience knows what that is, but it's
Yeah.
that you're like reenacting things with your body, like not awake, but you look like you're awake. That's kind of like a form of sleepwalking almost.
Sleepwalking. Okay. Yeah. That's the
Yeah.
picture I had in my head. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's kind of scary if you could witness somebody doing it. You're just, what do I do? Just don't.
And that had never been something you experienced before. Just
Yeah. I had never. Yeah. And the anxiety attacks, like they would just come on so randomly. Like just, I could just feel like my body was never was in this constant state of like fight or flight. So anyways, I thought, okay, I'm going to go to a therapist, which I did for 2 years faithfully, like a top therapist, talk about bereavement, started doing everything that people probably think of, medicine or exercise or journaling, meditation. Oh my gosh, green smoothies, just anything I could do.
All the things. All the things. Yeah.
And they never really healed those symptoms. I maybe was like functioning, but my body just still couldn't regulate itself. So anyways, what happened was finally one day I decided to read this book, and it was like life changing. It was called The Body Keeps the Score by John Van Epp. And he
Right over there. I have it right over there.
Yeah. And once I read that book, I realized, oh my gosh, I was taking a fire hose to a fire when I really needed the full fire department. And so that's when I started getting into the EMDR therapy. And within 2 months, I was finally able to like calm my body. And I remember being a little, I don't know, maybe ashamed about it when she came back, my therapist, and she's, yeah, you have PTSD. And I was like, no, PTSD is reserved for like war veterans, like people who have been in battle. I didn't want to trivialize something like that. And she was just like, no, it's so real and it can happen to anybody. And what you've been through merits that. And that's what you have. And that explains why you've been struggling for so long. Well, yeah, it was pretty wild. But once I did that, then I started to finally feel like I could regulate myself again and get back on track.
Yes. And did you find that you were doing that comparison thing, which happens so frequently in grief, that did you start doing that where you're comparing your loss and what you went through to what other people have experienced?
I don't know if I was comparing it to what they had experienced, but more that I felt very isolated. So like I can remember vividly being full of rage. I remember sitting at my desk at work and like hearing a coworker laugh about like fruit or something, just a very lighthearted topic. And I remember just feeling so mad. Like, how could you guys just be that happy talking about something so pointless in life? There was a sense of entitlement to my grief, I think, a little bit that I had a complex with. Do you know what life is really about? Have you just this anger? And
Yeah.
I
call it spiritual righteousness, but I fell into that too. Once you go, right, you're in the trenches and your life is impacted so significantly. Yeah. You're like, everything has to be this deep conversation that felt like
yeah.
Like you're laughing about like the silliness of things. No, this is serious. Life is serious.
Yeah, get it together. Be mature. You don't have, anyway, all those thoughts of, So that was an interesting phenomenon to go through. So yeah, I felt very isolated and there was a lot of shame involved. And I think a shame of no one's going to understand how painful this is, right? If I open up and share this with them, they're not going to take it as seriously as I do. So I wanted to keep it really close to me, but that meant that I was just spiraling all the time. And I didn't allow myself to lean on other people because I didn't trust anyone with it because it felt so heavy and so personal to me.
Wow, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody articulate it quite that way. But as soon as you said that, I couldn't trust anybody with such a heavy pain. Like my body reacted to that. Like I felt that in my body. Like that is, I think, what so many of us feel, but it's not having the words to articulate that. And I think that's what we're all trying to figure out with grief is like, how do I get out what I'm feeling inside, right? In a way that anybody could possibly understand, which to your point, like it just feels like impossible at that time.
I think that's what's so difficult about dealing with grief is because we try to deal with it intellectually. Like we think, okay, if I just read about it, or if I just do the meditation or whatever it is, or read this book, then I'm going to get better and it's going to feel better. But like
Mhm.
what I started understanding just from reading that book, like when you talk about your body, you're so exhausted all the time because your body is literally rewired. Your body is the thing that's in pain. And so you can't heal it through logical reasoning. There's just no way. And I think after having kids, it's become so much more apparent to me. Like when they're crying, I need to hold them. I need to embrace them. I need a warm connection with them. I need to do something physical. I can't just reason with them, right? When they're in the middle of a full meltdown. So that connection, I think, is just so vital. And yeah, when you're talking to somebody about this, they're going to give you the, oh my gosh, that sounds so horrible. I'm so sorry. And then that's the end of the conversation. Or it's okay. And you're still reliving it in your body the whole time. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to let people know about where you feel like you're not going to get that comfort. So you're like, I'd rather just deal with it internally and lose my mind.
Yes. And make myself feel like I'm going crazy. Yes. Yes. That's moving the path many of us have chosen. So for anybody who hasn't read that book, I will tell you it's dense. It
Yeah.
took me a couple times. The first time I picked it up, I was like, these words aren't making sense. They're not like computing. I felt that way when I read that book, The Power of Now, as well. But after some time, and after you have experienced something and you pick up those types of books again, then it's, oh, I get it. You know what I mean? You just have something to anchor in the words that they're sharing on the pages. But it is a fabulous book. And I think it really does highlight this kind of forgotten part that we focus on the emotional piece, we focus on the mental health piece of it, but we often ignore our body when we're going through pain and trauma and grief. And so I love that you are sharing this and we're making sure that that's a huge part of it. It's a huge pillar in the whole healing piece of it. And we can't forget about the body.
Yeah. Cause I was like, you're just in constant conflict with yourself. So like, just to clarify in the book, like basically he talks about it's all subconscious and it's all like in your frontal lobe. So you're reliving it constantly all the time, which is why your body can't regulate. So you have to go through certain therapies to move it from your frontal lobe, the back of the brain where like you're not having an emotional reaction to it. Like you remember it, but you're not feeling that visceral, like your heart rate's going, you start that panicked breathing. It feels like it's all in the same moment again. And that was life changing. I just think learning that for me.
I totally agree. The other life-changing thing that I learned was, did you read the book, The Grieving Brain?
No, that sounds
Oh,
fascinating.
you will love it. You will love it. It blew my mind because it really dives into what is actually happening in our mind and our brain when we lose somebody. And once you understand, it's the way I describe it is we've had this GPS system our whole life of all our relationships, and our brain has mapped and wired activities to the people in our lives. Like with my dad, it was like, okay, usually you talk on these times. He lived in Florida. So we would talk on the phone or we text. But my brain knew like those data points. Oh, there's a Florida Gators game on today. Like you and your dad are going to communicate because that's what we did. And so it was like having this like filing cabinet of all these data points of every interaction you have. And you're, and when you hold the love and attachment to somebody who's no longer physically here, like your mind doesn't understand that they're not here physically. It knows that you still have that attachment. And so it continues to predict when you're going to see that person again or when you're going to talk to that person, which is why we can go a year and go pick up our phone to text somebody that we logically know that they're not here, but it's that pattern recognition that's, hey, remember, you usually talk to this person at this time. And it's fascinating. And it's requires us to do reprogramming, to actively reprogram our mind, to let our mind know we want to hold on to the attachment, but we have to reprogram the wiring and the patterns.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It totally makes sense because, yeah, you're sharing your quality of love, how you function with somebody else. So when that's gone, and I think that's why, like, the pressure to heal from grief is so strong in society. You know what I mean? We always put this, okay, in a couple months, I'm gonna be at this milestone. I'm gonna start going out again and feeling better. And then we get upset when it like hits us again. It's almost like you're walking along the beach, along the water. You're like, all right, I got this. I'm going to turn my back now and I'm going to walk away. And then you get hit with another wave. And you're like, okay, I'm still on the beach. I'm not going to get off the beach. But I think speaking to your point, because you always have these moments that pop up that remind you, like, oh, okay. And then you
They're
have to,
still not here. And you have to go through that again.
yeah,
And I don't know about you, but it was fascinating to me when I got my grief educator, when I went through the process to get certified as a grief educator. One of the first things we learned was the difference between grief and grieving. And I was like, I thought those were the same thing. Like I've been using those words interchangeably, but it's so amazing how like just understanding like what a word really means and how we use it can totally change your outlook, because the way that I learned it and understand it is grief is what never goes away, right? Grief is the love in a different form. And because we hold that love and that attachment, that's why we say grief doesn't end, because that's what brings up those waves of emotions and the ebb and flows and the random Tuesday when, you're just going to the grocery store and something happens and you're hit with it again. And then the rest of the day, you're just down. But to your point, society has said to us, there's an end point with this, and there's not. And I think that's so much of the disconnection with grief, is that society has told us there's a point in time when you're not going to feel that anymore. And when we never reach that point in time, it makes us feel like we're doing it wrong.
with me. And then you start
What's wrong with,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And so just to learn and understand that's always going to be in my life was such a game changer, because then I stopped expecting it to not be there.
Yeah.
It lessens in kind of frequency. And when it hits, it still takes me out. But that was really a game changer, because then I could say, oh, okay, I'm just not going to make that expectation of myself anymore. And
Right.
then grieving, I learned, was that longer term process that we go through to adapt to a life where that person or pet or thing is no longer in our physical existence. And then how do I like find myself again? How do I show up in a world? How do I live in this world when everything around me has changed? And so just understanding that those were the two paths has significantly changed how I grieve. And I'm just fascinated that it took me that many years to understand that concept.
I think that was so well put. And my experience was very much the same. And I think it's because it's not something that's very talked about. And in my situation, I didn't really have the friends that we had a big group of friends that all spent time together. That was really close. And once I moved, I didn't have that group to grieve with. And that's such an important part of it, is to grieve. And I guess maybe I felt like I had to keep it together for everybody. Like I wanted to be strong for everyone else. Like this is what happened. And I didn't want to make it about me. I think I wanted to just be there for them, for my friend that had passed. But I just realized the importance. I wasn't able to finally really properly grieve, even with her family, until 2 years later. I was able to make a trip down. And it was so cathartic for me because I knew that it was a safe place that they understood without me even having to explain myself or validate myself or anything. And that was a game changer. It was a changing point for my healing once I was able to do that. So I think corralling those around you that you can feel safe around and really open up to and breathe with is so vital, I think, for allowing yourself to do that.
Completely agree. And community has been a missing piece of grief in our society. And I always love to talk about this story. And I forget, for something I talk about so much, I need to know the details of this story. So because I always say the same thing. I'm like, I forget where I heard this. But it was about talking about how we grieved in tribal days. And in tribal days, when somebody lost somebody in their life, everybody in the tribe was impacted. And the way that they showed that was at that night of the loss, everybody would physically move something in their environment. They would physically move something. So when they woke up the next morning, the person who experienced the loss would see that they weren't the only person impacted, that it impacted everybody in their community and their tribe. And I think that's just such a glaring example of how different we grieve today,
Yeah.
which is so much in isolation and feeling nobody understands. People are very hesitant to lean into grief for lots of reasons. And so I very much feel like community is the piece that we have to bring for
Yeah.
everybody's sake.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's like the thing.
Mm.
And I think it's a dysfunction that's everywhere. And like even the simple thing, right? Like feeling afraid to take time off work because you feel like it's going to affect your performance or that your team's going to look down, right? Because you're not in the constant wheel of putting out, of being in production mode, of saying my worth is what I can give to people, right? When it comes to what I'm achieving. And so much of our, I think, identity and self-worth is tied up in that. And the minute you go into grief, all that is ripped away. All of it. I really can't give anything. I'm completely depleted. And what is my value if I can't function? Right? What is it that I now can do? And is it about even doing? Right? For me, some days it was just like, hey, I got up and made my bed. That's amazing. Right? That is what I could do. And that's all.
Yeah.
And so it really shocks you down, I think, to your like very core. And you feel this constant guilt of not being able to perform, I think. And I just think that's not what it's about at all. It's about our spirits and our souls, our essence. And you have inherent worth no matter what you give, no matter what you don't give. And we know that because our kids, like they didn't do anything to deserve great praise. Like they're pooping, crying, and eating all day. That's not something impressive. And yet they are so lovable. And that's
Right.
we are at our core. Like we're just love.
Just love and born worthy, born enough, born
Right.
lovable, right? Like you said, there's nothing that they have to do to earn that. They come into the world with all of that, as we all do. And it's just life and conditioning that makes us question that along the way. And as adults, I think that's what we're really trying to figure out is how do we get back to that core? How do we get back to the essence of who we really are, where we're not constantly, like you said, trying to perform and get validation and have these external things tell us that we're enough. And I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like grief opens this portal to discovering that exact thing that no other experience in life comes close to.
I agree. Yeah. I think there's times in my life where I feel like spiritually you're just in a different realm or you have these life altering experiences and you're just left questioning everything. And that's actually really great. Like some of the best things are born from grief. And what you're doing, eventually, I think it always ends up becoming something better. And after having gone through that, I felt like after getting through that, I'm like, okay, I can take on anything. Except there's a few things. There's still some few things that actually terrify me. But I'm like, okay.
We don't want to speak of. I'm the
We
same
don't
way.
wanna
I'm like,
speak
we're
of.
not speaking of the. Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, if that ever did happen, like at least I would know a little bit better of how to deal with it.
I know exactly what you're talking about too. We are on the same page.
Yeah, it's okay. Could know at least not maybe how to fix my problem, but like how to approach it. And yeah. That.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's amazing how those of us that have gone through this, the details are very different, look very different, but at the core, we have so many, like we are very much more alike than we are different. I feel that way just for everybody, not just people going through grief, but I'm really encourage that more people are starting to have conversations about grief and really bringing it into the light because of that reason, because people need to know that they're not alone in this. And there's so many other people that are experiencing something that, you know, they're going to resonate with and they're going to understand. And that's what's important, community and just knowing you're not alone. Like you're not the only person experiencing this. And that's so important.
Yeah, and it is true. I remember actually being shocked because, of course, I thought I'm the only person in the world going. That's
Yeah,
everyone.
that's how you feel.
And
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I remember a couple of years later, I had a friend who went through almost the exact same experience, same circumstances, and I was just like, oh my gosh, and reached out to her immediately and asked how I could help. But yeah, there are so many people that go through this or have experienced something just that you would never wish on anyone else. And
Right.
letting them know you're not alone is such a comfort to people who truly get it. Like you get it. That's where the safety comes in and the trust.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, yeah, not everybody deserves to know our story or to get access to the deepest parts of us that impacted us the most. But I do think it's very important to surround yourself around people who get it, because one of the first needs that we have with grief is to have it witnessed and just to have other people who can sit with us and say, I see the pain. I can't fix it, but I'm here. And with that simple act is such an important part of the healing process. And it's hard to do that with people that are showing you that they don't understand or are distancing themselves from you, because then you just want to retreat, right? You want to just close down. And so community and surrounding yourself with people who understand, I think, is step one.
Yeah. For people who maybe, yeah, they don't have to know all the details. I think that's the beautiful thing. They don't have to know. They
Right.
just show you that, like, your pain is seen and you're heard, and that's it.
That's
And
it.
that's a beautiful thing that we can offer to anybody that's struggling.
It's presence. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about grief is so many people I talk to or I read comments that say, I don't want to make it worse. I don't have the right words to say, so they don't say anything. And I think most people in grief are saying it's not about that. There are no words. There's no words you can possibly say that are going to make me feel better about this right now. But silence is more deafening than any wrong word that you could say. And just to know, hey, you're here. I don't know what I need. You don't know what I need. That's okay. No one needs to know. It's not about the words. And like you said, it's so much more about just that presence in the body and just knowing that you have a safe person in your corner if you need them.
And not run away because this is too much.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
stand here and let you cry, and I'm here. And that's it. That's really it. Yeah.
Not try to fix it. And we're hardwired. We're hardwired to fix things. And it's not easy for us to see people that we love and care about in pain without wanting to step in and fix it. And I'm learning this lesson still every day with my kids and with my daughter, especially when she has a rough day, something's going on. I've now learned to ask, do you want me to just listen? Or do you want me to offer some advice or some ideas on how to make this different? And that's been really important for us because usually she doesn't want the suggestions. She just wants somebody to hear her without trying to fix her, make her think that she needs to be fixed even. And so that's been an ongoing lesson for me.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's probably ultimately why I'm so passionate about why with like the children, this book's about and parenting, because I think in society, I'm seeing this like fascination or obsession with being happy, but it's going about it in the wrong way because we think it means without pain. And it's actually like including pain and knowing how to handle it and process it well. And so like I see so many parents trying to make their kids' lives perfect. And so then when they're hit with something as just groundbreaking, they don't know how to deal with it. And yeah, like I think that's a beautiful example, like learning how to be a witness to enabling your kids to feel confident enough that they can solve their problems. And that's ultimately what it is not sipping in enough or not sipping in too little. That fine balance of having them grow into their confidence of how can I deal with all my emotions and know that I'm okay.
Exactly. And I know for my kids, I know the pendulum always swings, right? When I was growing up, we were left to our own. We don't have a ride home from school or practice, figure it out.
Right.
I don't know what to tell you. We didn't even have a cell phone that we could call our parents. We literally just had to figure it out. And that gave us some amazing life skills, right? We're resilient. We have strong work ethics. Like we're resourceful, like all of those things, but didn't really have that emotional framework and kind of felt like we were on our own. Whereas now my kids, like no question they're loved. It's just constantly telling them and validating that. And also probably stepping over that line of wanting to make everything okay for them and not letting them, like you said, experience those things themselves because that's how they learn and that's how they condition and that's how they develop those skills that they're going to need for the rest of their life. So important. And I just can't say enough. Love the direction that you took with this because it's filling a need and a gap in the grief space that I think not everybody's understanding needs to be filled. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I love that. Love that.
So we've talked about the scar piece, but I would love to we've touched on some of the wisdom, but just from this angle, what do you think was the greatest learning and teaching that you got from the experience that you went through?
I think for me personally, it was learning how to not earn my worth. That was a big deal. Like stopping over functioning. And then I think also just that I could get through something like that and live. Because I felt like every day I was just dying. That's how it felt. Was just this pain or it was so insurmountable. Or it was, I think it's not to be taken lightly. There's been news even recently of, I can't remember his name now, but the war veteran who came back from Afghanistan and had PTSD ended up murdering his 3 kids. This is serious stuff.
Yeah.
It can get that bad. And so I think just learning like how can I turn it around or how can I help other people turn it around has been the biggest thing that I've personally tried to take away from it.
That's beautiful. And if you could go back to yourself at that time, knowing the wisdom that you have now, what message would you give to that younger version of yourself?
Yeah, that's a great, beautiful way to look at it, I think. I just think I would tell her, like, you're honoring her, that it was a sacrifice, but it was one that I would do again, right? Because ultimately, in that moment, I was trying to help my friend and I cared about her enough to be there and I would do it again.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for being the first guest on this series. I feel like we have a lot more to talk about. So that part of this is just bringing a lot of different thought leaders and people together that are collectively wanting to make some progress in this space. And so that's what I'm excited about for everybody to hear how that's manifesting in different ways and everyone tapping into their zone of genius with this. And that's what excites me about this whole series. I'm going to get from you where people can get and look at your books because I want to do that myself. So I want to provide that as a resource and I'll put that in the description. When I put this on YouTube, you guys can have that as well. So thank you. We appreciate you and all you're doing in this world to help us move grief forward and to elevate our grief.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I appreciate what you're doing. That's really great to be here.